life in the world. There is a well-established Hindu tradition which prescribes 4 stages of life, asramas, for serious spiritual seekers. Brahmacharya, celibate study, a long period of scriptural study prior to marriage, usually in an institution which specializes in Vedic scholarship. Grihastha, marriage and family. At the conclusion of his studies, the aspirant is expected to marry and to discharge his business and household duties conscientiously, but without attachment to them. Vanaprastha, forest hermit. When all family obligations have been fulfilled, which usually means when the children are married off, the aspirant may retire to a solitary place, usually a forest, and engage in full-time meditation. Sannyasa, wandering monk. In the final stage, the seeker drops out of the world completely and becomes a wandering mendicant monk. Having no material, social, or financial entanglements, the sannyasi has theoretically removed all the attachments which previously impeded his progress towards self-realization. This time-honored structure sustained the common Indian belief that it was necessary to abandon one's family and to take to a meditative life of celibate asceticism if one was seriously interested in realizing the self. Sri Ramana was asked about this belief many times, but he always refused to endorse it. He consistently refused to give his devotees permission to give up their worldly responsibilities in favor of a meditative life, and he always insisted that realization was equally accessible to everyone, irrespective of their physical circumstances. Instead of advising physical renunciation, he told all his devotees that it would be spiritually more productive for them to discharge their normal duties and obligations with an awareness that there was no individual I performing or accepting responsibilities for the acts which the body performed. He firmly believed that mental attitude had a greater bearing on spiritual progress than physical circumstances, and he persistently discouraged all questioners who felt that a manipulation of their environment, however slight, would be spiritually beneficial. The only physical changes he ever sanctioned were dietary. He accepted the prevailing Hindu theory of diet, which claimed that the type of food consumed affected the quantity and quality of one's thoughts, and he recommended a moderate intake of vegetarian food as the most useful aid to spiritual practice. The Hindu dietary theory which Sri Ramana endorsed classifies different foods according to the mental states that they induce. Sattva, purity or harmony. Dairy produce, fruit, vegetables, and cereals are deemed to be sattvic foods. A diet which consists largely of these products helps spiritual aspirants to maintain a still, quiet mind. Rajas, activity. Rajasic foods include meat, fish, and hot, spicy foods, such as chilies, onions, and garlic. Ingestion of these foods results in an overactive mind. Tamas, sluggishness. Foods which are decayed, stale, or the product of a fermentation process, e.g., alcohol, are classified as tamasic. Consumption of these foods leads to apathetic, torpid states of mind which hamper clear, decisive thinking. I have a good mind to resign from service and remain constantly with Sri Bhagavan. Bhagavan is always with you, in you, and you are yourself Bhagavan. To realize this, it is neither necessary to resign your job nor run away from home. Renunciation does not imply apparent divesting of costumes, family ties, home, etc., but renunciation of desires, affection, and attachment. There is no need to resign your job, only resign yourself to God, the bearer of the burden of all. One who renounces desires actually merges in the world and expands his love to the whole universe. Expansion of love and affection would be a far better term for a true devotee of God than renunciation. For one who renounces the immediate ties actually extends the bonds of affection and love to a wider world beyond the borders of caste, creed, and race. A sannyasi who apparently casts away his clothes and leaves his home does not do so out of aversion to his immediate relations, but because of the expansion of his love to others around him. When this expansion comes, one does not feel that one is running away from home. Instead, one drops from it like a ripe fruit from a tree. Till then, it would be folly to leave one's home or job. How does a grihasta householder fare in the scheme of moksha, liberation? Should he not necessarily become a mendicant in order to attain liberation? Why do you think you are a grihasta? Similar thoughts that you are a sannyasi, wandering monk, will haunt you, even if you go out as a sannyasi. Whether you continue in the household or renounce it and go to the forest, your mind haunts you. The ego is the source of thought. It creates the body and the world, and it makes you think of being the grihasta. If you renounce, it will only substitute the thought of sannyasa for that of grihasta, and the environment of the forest for that of the household. But the mental obstacles are always there for you. They even increase greatly in new surroundings. It is no help to change the environment. The one obstacle is the mind, and it must be overcome whether in the home or in the forest. If you can do it in the forest, why not in the home? Therefore, why change the environment? Your efforts can be made even now, whatever the environment. Is it possible to enjoy samadhi, awareness of reality, while busy in worldly work? The feeling of I work is the hindrance. Ask yourself, who works? Remember who you are. Then the work will not bind you. It will go on automatically. Make no effort either to work or to renounce. It is your effort which is the bondage. What is destined to happen will happen. If you are destined not to work, work cannot be had even if you hunt for it. If you are destined to work, you will not be able to avoid it, and you will be forced to engage yourself in it. So leave it to the higher power. You cannot renounce or retain as you choose. Bhagavan said yesterday that while one is engaged in search of God within, other work would go on automatically. In the life of Sri Chaitanya, it is said that during his lectures to students, he was really seeking Krishna within, and he forgot all about his body and went on talking of Krishna only. This raises a doubt as to whether work can safely be left to itself. Should one keep part of one's attention on the physical work? The self is all. Are you apart from the self, or can the work go on without the self? The self is universal, so all actions will go on whether you strain yourself to be engaged in them or not. The work will go on of itself. Thus Krishna told Arjuna that he need not trouble to kill the Kauravas because they were already slain by God. It was not for him to resolve to work and worry himself about it, but to allow his own nature to carry out the will of the higher power. But the work may suffer if I do not attend to it. Attending to the self means attending to the work. Because you identify yourself with the body, you think that work is done by you. But the body and its activities, including that work, are not apart from the self. What does it matter whether you attend to the work or not? When you walk from one place to another, you do not attend to the steps you take, and yet you find yourself after a time at your goal. You see how the business of walking goes on without your attending to it. So also with other kinds of work. If one holds the self in remembrance, will one's actions always be right? They ought to be. However, such a person is not concerned with the right or wrong of actions. His actions are God's and therefore right. How can my mind be still if I have to use it more than other people? I want to go into solitude and renounce my headmaster's work. No, you may remain where you are and go on with the work. What is the undercurrent which vivifies the mind, enables it to do all this work? It is the self. So that is the real source of your activity. Simply be aware of it during your work and do not forget it. Contemplate in the background of your mind even whilst working. To do that, do not hurry. Take your own time. Keep the remembrance of your real nature alive, even while working, and avoid haste, which causes you to forget. Be deliberate. Practice meditation to still the mind and cause it to become aware of its true relationship to the self which supports it. Do not imagine it is you who are doing the work. Think that it is the underlying current which is doing it. Identify yourself with the current. If you work unhurriedly, recollectedly, your work or service need not be a hindrance. In the early stages, would it not be a help to a man to seek solitude and give up his outer duties in life? Renunciation is always in the mind, not in going to the forest or solitary places or giving up one's duties. The main thing is to see that the mind does not turn outward, but inward. It does not really rest with the man, whether he goes to this place or whether he gives up his duties or not. All these events happen according to destiny. All the activities that the body is to go through are determined when it first comes into existence. It does not rest with you to accept or reject them. The only freedom you have is to turn your mind inward and renounce activities there. But is it not possible for something to be a help, especially to a beginner, like a fence round a young tree? For instance, don't our books say that it is helpful to go on pilgrimages to sacred shrines or to get satsanga? Who said they are not helpful? Only such things do not rest with you, whereas turning your mind inward does. Many people desire the pilgrimage or satsanga that you mentioned, but do they all get it? Why is it that turning inward alone is left to us and not any outer things? If you want to go to fundamentals, you must inquire who you are and find out who it is who has freedom or destiny. Who are you? And why do you get this body that has these limitations? Is solitude necessary for vichara? There is solitude everywhere. The individual is solitary always. His business is to find it out within, not to seek it outside himself. Solitude is in the mind of man. One might be in the thick of the world and maintain serenity of mind. Such a one is in solitude. Another may stay in a forest but still be unable to control his mind. Such a man cannot be said to be in solitude. Solitude is a function of the mind. A man attached to desires cannot get solitude wherever he may be, whereas a detached man is always in solitude. So then one might be engaged in work and be free from desire and keep up solitude. Is it so? Yes. Work performed with attachment is a shackle, whereas work performed with detachment does not affect the doer. One who works like this, even while working, is in solitude. Our everyday life is not compatible with such efforts. Why do you think you are active? Take the gross example of your arrival here. You left home in a cart, took a train, alighted at the railway station here, got into a cart there, and found yourself at this ashram. When asked, you say that you traveled here all the way from your town. Is it true? Is it not a fact that you remained as you were? And these were movements of conveyances all along the way. Just as those movements are confounded with your own, so also are the other activities. They are not your own. They are God's activities. How can cessation of activity, nivritti, and peace of mind be attained in the midst of household duties which are of the nature of constant activity? As the activities of the wise man exist only in the eyes of others and not in his own, although he may be accomplishing immense tasks, he really does nothing. Therefore, his activities do not stand in the way of inaction and peace of mind, for he knows the truth, that all activities take place in his mere presence, and that he does nothing. Hence he will remain as the silent witness of the activities taking place. Is it harder for Westerners to withdraw inwards? Yes, they are rajasic, mentally overactive, and their energy goes outwards. We must be inwardly quiet, not forgetting the self, and then externally we can go on with activity. Does a man who is acting on the stage in a female part forget that he is a man? Similarly, we too must play our parts on the stage of life, but we must not identify ourselves with those parts. How does one remove the spiritual sloth of others? Have you removed your own? Turn your inquiries towards the self. The force set up within you will operate on others also. But how can I help another with his problem, his troubles? What is this talk of another? There is only one. Try to realize that there is no I, no you, no he, only the one which is all. If you believe in the problem of another, you are believing in something outside the self. You will best help him by realizing the oneness of everything rather than by outward activity. Do you approve of sexual continence? A true brahmachari, celibate, is one who dwells in Brahman. Then there is no question of desires any more. At Sri Aurobindo's ashram, there is a rigid rule that married couples are permitted to live there on condition that they have no sexual intercourse. What is the use of that? If it exists in the mind, what use is it to force people to abstain? Is marriage a bar to spiritual progress? The householder's life is not a bar, but the householder must do his utmost to practice self-control. If a man has a strong desire for the higher life, then the sex tendency will subside. When the mind is destroyed, the other desires are destroyed also. I have committed sexual sin. Even if you have, it does not matter so long as you do not think afterwards that you have done so. The self is not aware of any sin, and renunciation of sex is internal, not merely of the body alone. I am carried away by the sight of the breasts of a young woman neighbor, and I am often tempted to commit adultery with her. What should I do? You are always pure. It is your senses and body which tempt you and which you confuse with your real self. So first know who is tempted and who is there to tempt. But even if you do commit adultery, do not think about it afterwards, because you are yourself always pure. You are not the sinner. How do we root out our sex idea? By rooting out the false idea of the body being the self. There is no sex in the self. Be the self, and then you will have no sex troubles. Can fasting cure sexual desire? Yes, but it is temporary. Mental fast is the real aid. Fasting is not an end in itself. There must be spiritual development side by side. Complete fasting makes the mind too weak. The spiritual quest must be kept up right through a fast if it is to benefit spiritually. Can one progress spiritually by fasting? Fasting should be chiefly mental, abstention from thoughts. Mere abstinence from food will do no good. It will even upset the mind. Spiritual unfoldment will come rather by regulating eating. But if during a fast of 1 month the spiritual outlook has been maintained, then in about 10 days after the breaking of the fast, if it be rightly broken and followed by judicious eating, the mind will become pure and steady and remain so. In the early days after my coming here, I had my eyes closed, and I was so deeply absorbed in meditation that I hardly knew whether it was day or night. I had no food and no sleep. When there is movement in the body, you need food. If you have food, you need sleep. If there is no movement, you do not need sleep. Very little food is enough to sustain life. That used to be my experience. Somebody or other used to offer me a tumbler full of some liquid diet whenever I opened my eyes. That was all I ever ate. But remember one thing, except when one is absorbed in a state where the mind is motionless, it is not possible to give up sleep or food altogether. When the body and mind are engaged in the ordinary pursuits of life, the body reels if you give up food and sleep. There are differing theories concerning how such a sadhaka should eat and how much he should sleep. Some say that it is healthy to go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 2 a.m. That means that 4 hours sleep is enough. Some say that 4 hours sleep is not enough and that it should be 6 hours. It amounts to this, that sleep and food should not be taken in excess. If you want to cut off either of them completely, your mind will always be directed towards them. Therefore, the sadhaka should do everything in moderation. There is no harm in eating 3 or 4 times a day, but only do not say, I want this kind of food and not that kind, and so on. Moreover, you take these meals in 12 hours of waking, whereas you are not eating in 12 hours of sleep. Does sleep lead you to mukti? It is wrong to suppose that simple inactivity leads one to mukti. What about diet? Food affects the mind. For the practice of any kind of yoga, vegetarianism is absolutely necessary since it makes the mind more sattvic, pure and harmonious. Could one receive spiritual illumination while eating flesh foods? Yes, but abandon them gradually and accustom yourself to sattvic foods. However, once you have attained illumination, it will make less difference what you eat, as on a great fire, it is immaterial what fuel is added. We Europeans are accustomed to a particular diet, and a change of diet affects the health and weakens the mind. Is it not necessary to keep up one's physical health? Quite necessary. The weaker the body, the stronger the mind grows. In the absence of our usual diet, our health suffers and the mind loses strength. What do you mean by strength of mind? The power to eliminate worldly attachment. The quality of food influences the mind. The mind feeds on the food consumed. Really? Then how can Europeans adjust themselves to sattvic food only? Habit is only adjustment to the environment. It is the mind that matters. The fact is that the mind has been trained to think certain foods tasty and good. The food material is to be had both in vegetarian and non-vegetarian diet equally well, but the mind desires such food as it is accustomed to and considers tasty. Are there restrictions for the realized man with regard to food? No, he is steady and not influenced by the food he takes. Is it not killing life to prepare a meat diet? Ahimsa, non-violence, stands foremost in the code of discipline for the yogis. Even plants have life, so do the slabs you sit on. May we gradually get ourselves accustomed to vegetarian food? Yes, that is the way. Is it harmless to continue smoking? No, for tobacco is a poison. It is better to do without it. It is good that you have given up smoking. Men are enslaved by tobacco and cannot give it up. But tobacco only gives a temporary stimulation to which there must be a reaction with craving for more. It is also not good for meditation practice. Do you recommend that meat and alcoholic drinks be given up? It is advisable to give them up because this abstention is a useful aid for beginners. The difficulty in surrendering them does not arise because they are really necessary, but merely because we have become inured by custom and habit to them. Generally speaking, what are the rules of conduct which an aspirant should follow? Moderation in food, moderation in sleep, and moderation in speech.